Chair would like to call the Executive Committee meeting of the McLean County Board to order. And we have 5 members present. We have a quorum to, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6. I didn't count myself. I'm sorry. We have 6 present. That is a quorum. We can conduct business. And consent agenda, we have meeting minutes for March 11th, regular meeting, January 11th special meeting, and February 15th special meeting for 2024. May I have a motion to approve? We have a motion by Chair Friedrich and a second by Vice Chair Johnston. Is there any discussion? No discussion. All in favor of the, and then we have the payment of bills. Just a moment. And the motion will be for both the meeting minutes and the payment of bills, correct? And our payment of bills, we have $633, $652.99 for the executive committee. And then for regional planning, we have $16,515.56. All in favor of the bills and the meeting minutes, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion passes, and Member Lehman was here for that vote. And did we have any appearances by members of the public?
Chair Metzger, we've had no requests by anyone to speak this evening.
All right, we will move to Executive Committee Department Matters, and that's 4A. And we have a lot of appointments. The appointments for this month are really to fill a lot of the Fire Protection District spots. We have a few others, water reclamation, but most of these are our fire protection districts throughout the county. And I would like a motion to accept these appointments. May I have a motion? I have a motion by Vice Chair Johnston and a second by Member Schaefer. Is there any discussion? Yes.
I would just, as a for appointment of Dr. Joan Brem.
Yes,
I think it would be more appropriate to have her home address rather than her
we
campus
are
address.
working on that.
Okay,
But thank you for that acknowledgement. It was brought to our attention prior to the meeting, but that is certainly something that we are going to make sure happens before the county board meeting, but should this move forward. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the appointments? We also have an appointment to the Central Illinois Regional Airport. All in favor of the appointments, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion passes. We'll go to 4A1, and that is information technology. And we have a request approval of a resolution of McLean County Board approving the sole source procurement for security improvements for the government center. And may I have a motion for that? And please note that Member Erickson is here for that vote. May I have a motion for the sole source procurement security improvements for the government center? We have a motion by Vice Chair Klein, or Chair Klein, and a second by Chair Lehman. Is there any discussion? I think we had quite a bit of discussion previously, so all in favor of that, the procurement for security improvements for the government center, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion passes. We will now go to 4A1D, and that is the Behavioral Health Coordinating Council. We have request approval of the McLean County grant form, and that is found on page 23 through 25. And may I have a motion for that? We have a motion by Chair Schaefer, and we have a second by Vice Chair Johnston. Is there any discussion or additional review needed? Seeing none. All in favor of the Behavioral Health Coordinating Council request approval of the McLean County grant form, say aye. Opposed? That motion passes. Then we are moving to 4A1D D2, and that's request approval of an agreement with the Baby Fold. And may I have a motion for that? I have a motion by Member Chair Klein and a second by Chair Lehman. All in favor of, is there any discussion? All in favor of the agreement with the Baby Fold, say aye. Opposed? That motion will pass. I'm not sure if we, I think, yeah, I think we should take D3, 4, 5 together. So if no one objects, we'll take 4A1D, D3, D4, and D5, and those are agreements with the Center for Youth and Family Solutions. Request approval of an agreement with the Center for Human Services, and request approval for an agreement with the Regional Office of Education number 17. May I have a motion? We have a motion by Vice Chair Johnston and a second by Member Klein. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the agreement with the Center for Youth and Family Solutions, agreement for Center for Human Services, and the agreement for Regional Office of Education number 17, say aye. Opposed? That motion passes. We are now at 4A1D D6, and that's request approval of a resolution amending the funded full-time equivalent position resolution fiscal year 2024 for Fund 007. And may I have a motion for that, please? I have a motion from Chair Schaefer and a second by Vice Chair Johnston. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the full-time equivalent position resolution for Fund 0007, say aye. Opposed? That motion passes. Now we are at 4A1D D7 and request approval of an emergency appropriation ordinance amending the McLean County fiscal year 2024 combined annual appropriation budget ordinance. That's found on page 39 through 40, and this is cleanup, I believe. Am I not correct?
This EA is in as a follow-up to all of the other items that are related to the Systems of Care grant.
Right. So, but we're taking that through 2024, so as opposed to.
It's this year so that we can start the grant. Yep.
Right, thank you. So all in favor of the, excuse me, I need a motion for the combined annual appropriation. We have a motion by Johnston and a second by Lehman. And all in favor of the fiscal year combined annual appropriation budget for the SOC grant, say aye. Opposed? That motion passes. Now we have 4A1E, and that is subcommittee, rural subcommittee. And we have 4A1E, E1, and these are all the sections that, this is a kind of a consent, that these were the pieces of the rules that all had agreed on, and prior, I guess we agreed at the county board meeting, but it didn't get passed, so we brought it to rules, and our Vice Chair Johnston had this on a consent. Am I not correct? So I need a motion for that. I have a motion by Member Lehman and a second by Member Klein. Is there any discussion on this? All in favor? Oh, yes.
Just for clarification, we're voting on 4A1E, E1, right?
Correct, E1.
Thank you.
And those would be for Chapter 20, Section 2, 3, 4, 11A, 11D, 11H1, 12E, 12I, 13G sub 2, 13G sub 3, 13H, 13L, 16F sub 7 and 8, and 20G. All in favor of these rule changes, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion passes. Now we are moving to 4A1E, E2, and that is to amend Chapter 20, 10A sub 1 of the McLean County Code Rules, and that's found on page 47. And I need a motion to put that on the floor. We have a motion by Vice Chair Johnston, and we have a second by Member Rogel. Any discussion? All right, seeing no discussion. All in favor of the amendment to Section 10A1, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
All right, so we have one opposition, but that motion will pass. 4A1E, and that is request approval of the amendment of Chapter 20, Section 10I of the McLean County Board. That's found on page 48. And may I have a motion? We have a motion by Klein and a second by Vice Chair Johnston. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing no discussion, we're going to vote on the change for Section 2010I. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
And we have one opposing vote, but that motion passes. 4A1E4, request approval of the amendment for Chapter 20, Section 11D of the McLean County Code County Board Rules. That also is found on page 48. May I have a motion? We have a motion by Rogel and a second by Klein. Any discussion? Yes.
Just a Scrivener's update.
You're quite good at that, so thank you very much.
There needs to be a comma after the word ordinances, comma, and proposals. That's it.
Oh, yes, a comma after ordinances. Very good. Yes, we don't want ordinances and proposals. They need to be separate, so thank you.
I had remarked to Rules Committee that Leah was stepping in for the long absent Victoria Harris and her grammar, please.
That's good. We need to make sure it is clear as we move forward, so thank you very much, Dr. Klein. All in favor of 4A1E4, and that would be the rule, Chapter 20, Section 11D, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion passes. 4A1 E5, request approval of the amendment of Chapter 20, and that's 11E of the McLean County Code, County Board Rules, found on page 48 and 49. And I need a motion. We have a motion by Johnston and a second by Member Klein, or Chair Klein. Yes, and Vice Chair Johnston would like to have the floor.
Just a quick, also, I guess this is a Scrivener's error, is to remove the option 1 dash language presented and approved in 2021, not to be included in the rules packet. So this was, where are we?
It should be on this page.
This part?
Yes.
So right below the section listing out that this would be reports and communications, we have option 1, because there were 2 options presented to amend this.
and so it's
Option 1 was taken, but we do not need to keep
We
option 1.
don't need to have option 1
We do not.
as a notation, is
We
what
do
we're
not.
saying. Very good, yes. So based on that minor change, and I'm assuming Vice Chair Johnston and Member Klein still want to keep their motions. All in favor of the approval of Chapter 20, Section 11E of the McLean County Code, County Board Rules, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. And we have 1 opposition vote, but that motion passes. 4A1E6, and that's request approval of the amendment of the Chapter 20, 13K of the McLean County Code, County Board Rules, found on page 9 of 49. And may I have a motion? I have a motion by Member Rogel, or Chair Rogel, and a second by Chair Klein. Any discussion? Very good.
Back with you with another grammatical error. It did not get picked up after the meeting, but it should be who, not whom.
Oh, yes, that was noted before. All right. And all in favor of the request approval of Chapter 20, Section 13K, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. One opposing vote, but motion passes. 4A1EE7, request approval of the amendment of Chapter 20, Section 19 of the McLean County Board, County Board Rules, found on page 49. And may I have a motion, please? I have a motion by Chair Lehman and a second by Vice Chair Johnston. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the change to Section 20, Chapter 20, Section 19, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. One opposition vote, but the motion passes. 4A1E8, request approval of the amendment to Chapter 20, Section 20C, sub 2 of the McLean County Code, County Board Rules. And may I have a motion for that? And we have a motion by Lehman and a second by Rogel. Any discussion? All in favor of the change to Chapter 20, Section 20C, subgroup 2, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. We have 3. We have 3, and I'm also voting no. So that will die. It is a tie vote. Then 4A1E9, request approval of the amendment of Chapter 20, Section 20D of the McLean County Board, County Board Rules, and that's found on page 50. And may I have a motion on that? We have a motion by Johnston and a second by Lehman. And is there any discussion on this? Yes. Vice Chair Johnston.
Thank you. This was an issue that was brought up by our Assistant State's Attorney, that this is a requirement for us to be able to pursue remote attendance at all, because our current code does not, what was the language that you used, Mr. Sierra? The current code, we're not allowed to admit people for remote attendance under our current code.
I don't remember exactly what language I used previously. I apologize. But as it stands, our county board rule is inconsistent with the Open Meetings Act.
So this would clarify and allow us to admit people as a remote attendance under the amendment.
I think it clarifies the language to a positive versus a negative, and that was the recommendation of our state's attorney.
And it brings us in line with the Open Meetings Act.
Exactly.
Yes.
I agree with all that.
Okay,
Just
very
wanted to
good. I'm
clarify
sorry.
that.
I know that we kind of caught you off guard, so I apologize for that.
Not necessarily.
So, point taken. Any other discussion? All in favor of the change to the rule, Chapter 20, Section 20D, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion passes. Then we are moving to 4A1F, and that is Legislative Subcommittee F1, request approval of a resolution of the McLean County Board adopting 2024 legislative program for McLean County Board, and I need a motion for that. We have a motion by Chair Rogal and a second by Chair Klein. Any discussion on this? We have a member, our Chair Schaefer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We had this last month here, and I had wanted a change to one of the items, but actually, there's two items that I'm challenged with, is that when they're talking about specific bills, those bills can change dramatically between when they get introduced to when they actually may get through committees and with amendments and stuff like that. And so with our legislative program, I think we should be more broad in what we're looking for. And so for that one with the Open Meetings Act, which has the bill number, and also with the one with the Family Farms Preservation Act, while I agree that the tax code needs to change, that bill could change dramatically too between now and whenever it may or may not get any further than what it is right now. So to me, I would almost like to take those two out of our legislative agenda so that we can have a very broad agenda. And then when those types of items come up and those bills actually get to hearings and where we want to really influence our legislators and the rest of the General Assembly, people can file witness slips in opposition or, as a proponent of those types of bills. So that's why I'm kind of, I'd really like to see those two taken out. So I'd kind of like to make amendment here to remove those two from our legislative agenda.
Those are found on,
I don't have the right numbers. 55 and 56.
all right, at the bottom of page 55,
Correct.
and then at the top of page 56, correct?
Correct.
So you are making a motion to remove those two, but keep the remaining legislative program the same.
Correct.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. May I have a second? We have a second by member Friedrich. So now we can have a discussion on this topic. So, or Chair Friedrich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I concur. You know, the first one is the agriculture tax reform, where they're expanding the tax base or mimicking federal. And as you know, I'm a farmer and I'm all for it. But again, this subject is very complex and it's a moving target. And there's a couple other things on this legislative committee program that are okay, and then they're not okay, in my opinion. So I get frustrated in combining everything together. So I would agree with pulling two. I'd like to pull more, but I'll go along with just two. And again, nobody supports agriculture more than me, but I think we actually need to mimic federal law more on some of this stuff. Thank you.
And Vice Chair Johnston.
Thank you. Just for clarification, when you submit items to the legislative subcommittee for consideration, you are asked to put bills on there that specifically address it. So it feels very, to say we don't want to support bills, but then to request bills on it. So that's kind of a frustration. From the committee's perspective, I would assume to do that. If we're not opposed necessarily to the idea of supporting the farmers, would it be more beneficial to simply strike the specific bill number but keep the content? Is my question. Because I'm not necessarily in favor of striking them off the agenda altogether, but I can understand where amendments may change the content of the bill.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
All right. So, but we have a second on to strike it. So let's finish that discussion, vote on that, and if that fails, then we will move forward. So, Chair Klein.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I'm going to vote no about striking, because I think these are both important. But rather than making an adjustment, because I don't think it will hold together if we just take the bill number away, make a suggestions when we get to that point, if we get to that point, to maybe put a date around, so the amendments change over time, right? So if we said HB 4600 as initially proposed or something like that, in that language for this year, and then deal with the issue down the road that people are being forced to give a bill number that maybe we don't want to be attaching. But if we could, the basis of these supports are on the bills as they stand at this moment. So I think we could probably find a way to put something in the text that says, you know, the date as they were written at this date, which is a matter of law, a public notice, that might solve the problem in the short term. But I will vote no in the short term.
You will vote no on this amendment because you would like to see something different. And Chair Erickson.
Thank you, Chair. If it were up to me, I would change the whole language and say that the language ought to say that the Illinois legislature should tie the state exemption to the federal exemption presently being 13.61 million. It is a fact that many states do that. Many states have the same exemption as the federal exemption, and they tie it to the federal exemption, and that would be my preference. And it's almost like I'm on a sliding scale here. I'd like to see that first. If that weren't going to happen, then it ought to be 6 million for all, with a scale for family farms after 6. And then I might be willing to support the language as is, but I would like to amend it to say that and I don't know what the process of this would be, but to say that we ought to tie the state exemption to the federal exemption. That should be our policy. That would be my proposal.
And Vice Chair Johnston.
I can understand wanting to tie it to the federal. My concern about that is that right now the federal law is is going, if they don't do anything different in DC, it will sunset December 31st, 2025, and we'll go back to the 5.6 million. So if Illinois is considering a larger amount, I think that would be more in favor of our farmers here in the state, in case that sunsets.
And Chair Erickson.
Well, a lot of things can happen between now and the end of next year. And it's always been my experience doing estate tax planning that I've watched Congress always move it up at the very end because they always debate it right up to the last day, and then they'll change it, they'll move it up at the last minute. So I don't think that would ultimately be a problem. I would also, for people within the gap, it'd be nice for them to have that 13.61 million, at least if it passed this year and became effective January 1st, 2025, to have the 13.61 million for the entire year of 2025, which is what they would have. I don't know what I need to do to make a motion, but I'm making a motion to make
Just a
that
moment, we
change.
need to, one more comment on the motion that's on the floor, and that would be to,
I understand that, but I just said, and I asked a question, I don't know what I need to do to make a motion.
we will come back to that. How about that? Is that good?
Yes.
All right, thank you. And I made a notation on what you had said. And Chair Schaefer.
Hearing this discussion, I'm willing to withdraw my motion, my amendment. However, to keep moving our legislative agenda forward, would it be appropriate to have these two items go back to legislative and then do an updated legislative program to get the wording, so we're not going to sit here and hash it all out, and have the legislative committee actually work out what kind of wording that might happen to make this, a little bit more palatable to everyone? Like I
So
said,
you're willing to withdraw your amendment as it's, or you want to alter that amendment to send those two back to the legislative committee, subcommittee?
Yeah, and have, and address the wording, so we're not, unless we really want to sit here and wordsmith a whole bunch of stuff, and I actually think that that's the legislative committee's responsibility.
So she is willing to do that. So our second was from Member Friedrich, and Member Friedrich.
I'd be happy to go along with Schaefer's recommendation. Is there a time limit? Or that we bumping against a time limit in which we have to have this done? I'd be happy with that, but I was thinking there was.
So there's still discussion, so we're not going to change that amendment yet because Chair Rogal wants to make a comment.
We're going to up against, in Springfield at least, they're up against third reading deadlines. This week, they're going to adjourn at the end of May. If we're not going to be a part of any of this discussion, we should just not do any legislative agenda and save some money and not hire our lobbyist. So we've sent this all back to Legislative Subcommittee twice. We sent it back a third time. We won't be voting on this till the end of session. So most of it will be mute by that point.
So there is a time limit. So let's vote on the amendment at hand. Then we can have additional discussion and try to resolve this. So all in
Can you
favor?
repeat back what the motion is again?
The motion was to remove the Open Meetings Act topic and the Family Farms Preservation Act topic from our legislative committee, our legislative program for 2024.
And we're voting on it even though it's been withdrawn?
We didn't withdraw that, I don't believe. Did you withdraw that? Okay, so we withdrew both, and we got a second withdrawal. All right. Are we good with that we have withdrawn that amendment, okay? So now, we have on the floor our legislative program, and Member Klein, you would like to make a comment?
Yes, I understand the concerns about the bill numbers. I also understand the concerns about the timeline. My question to my colleagues is, do we find those two, I mean, it's one thing, Member Rogal, to send the entire thing back to the legislative subcommittee, but if we were to allow the remainder of the legislative program to go forward and allow our lobbyists to work on that, then we would just be talking about the Open Meetings Act and the Family Farm Preservation Act, which may appear late, and I don't know how close they are to movement on those two particular items. So, I mean to say, I'm not a fan of not approving any of it, but if we were able to pull these two things, I mean, we risk not being much of a voice in it this cycle. I don't know what people think about it. I mean, I agree. I don't know that we want to be sitting up here and tinkering with little bits of this, and I also feel like that erases the work of the legislative subcommittee, right? That their voice and their work is important. But I also don't want to be in an impasse over the entirety of the legislative program over just these two things.
All right, and Vice Chair Johnston.
Would it be appropriate to reconsider the notation that we support these bills as they stand on this particular date, so that it wouldn't necessarily encompass the amendments? I mean, that was a suggestion from Chair Klein as
All
consideration
right,
for
so
keeping
does
the bill
Chair
numbers in.
Klein want to make that a motion as an amendment to the legislative program? Or does she want to send them back to, just those two pieces, send them back to legislation and let the others move forward?
Yeah, I would like to make a motion.
All right, just before we do that, I see that Member, or Chair Erickson would like to make a comment, and then we can come
Well,
back
it
to
would
that
probably be
potentially.
easier, since I would like to make a motion to tie the exemption to the federal exemption. Even if I don't get a second on that, I would at least like to be on the record that that's what I requested. And then if that's voted down, it would be easier to address Member Klein's motion than to try to come back and address my motion afterwards.
All right, so,
I make a motion that we tie the federal exemption to the state exemption.
and that is for the topic HB 4600, Family Farms Preservation Act. May I have, so we have a motion for an amendment by Member, Chair Erickson. And do we have a second by Chair Friedrich? All right. Now
Just
we
a-
can have discussion, and Chair Klein.
Just my question was, is that the wording? Topic? Dash, tie the, I mean, is that the wording that you want?
That's fine with me. Tie the tie the state exemption to the federal exemption. I mean, I haven't had hours to think out how I would exactly word that, but
Tie the state, Illinois State Tax Code exemption to the federal tax code exemption. Is that what we're saying?
yes.
And we have a question from our administrator.
Just for a point of clarification, are you wanting that to be the recommendation or the topic structure? So I think the recommendation is to tie it, the state exemption to the federal exemption.
As opposed to have supporting the topic, is that what you're?
Correct. So if you look at that topic, it starts out HB 4600 Family Farms Preservation Act. That's the title. Then if you look at the next paragraph, it states what the recommendation is. So you could have the title and the recommendation be the same thing, but I think we do need to point out that that sounded like a recommendation.
So are you saying that that in the recommendation, we should put tied to the federal exemption?
As opposed to supporting Bill HB 4600.
That's my question.
No, because my position on it is that the bill ought to be tied to the federal exemption. That's my primary position. My backup position would be I would support HB 4600 if that's all I could get. So however you want to word that is fine with me. But it seems to me we ought to indicate to the legislature that our preference is not for HB 4600. Our preference is for the federal and state exemption to be tied together. However we do that is fine with me. I'm not the parliamentarian up here, and don't pretend to be. I'm just asking, how would we do that?
And Chair Klein?
Sorry, I just want to ask this question. Member Erickson, did you attend the legislative subcommittee meeting and present this opinion and they voted against it, or is this the first time you're airing it?
I can still add amendments to anything, even on the executive committee, but to answer your question directly, no, I did not attend the legislative subcommittee.
It wasn't a slight, it was an honest question about whether that committee had taken that recommendation and discussed it and rejected it, because that would change my opinion about whether we need to send it to them. If they've already rejected it, why would we send that to them, right? So,
Well, I don't know if they ever considered it. I don't know if they ever got an
All right,
opportunity to consider it.
So Vice Chair Johnston.
So I think if we were going to pursue this, where we can keep the language regarding the topic, but that the recommendation read to support tying HB.
No, I think it would be support tying the state exemption, inheritance tax exemption, to the federal tax exemption, as opposed to supporting HB 46.
So we would strike that off the recommendation and replace it? Is
And
that what we're-
replace
is
it.
that
I
what this
believe
is?
that
Okay.
is what
That's-
Member Erickson would like to see. And we
Yes.
have a second from Member Friedrich.
Call the question.
Before you said that, Chair Schaefer had her hand raised, and then we will call to question as soon as she makes her comment.
Thank you. I just like a little clarity on this one, because if you're changing the recommendation, you're changing the topic, but then are you changing any of the text? Because then it talks about family farmers, and then the 4 million and 6 million. Are you changing that whole text? And that's why I was suggesting to put this back to legislative for the items that we have questions on, to actually do the whole wordsmithing on this. And then if this does come up, then we can work with our lobbyists to move forward on it. So I'm clarifying what we're voting on here.
The topic remains the same, but the recommendation is to support tying the state inheritance tax exemption to the federal exemption. So it just states, the topic states what that bill is doing, but the recommendation, instead of supporting that, will change to support the state inheritance tax exemption, to tie it with the federal inheritance tax exemption. So the topic remains the same, the recommendation changes. We have a call. We have a call to the question, so we're going to vote. All in favor of that change of the recommendation only, say aye.
Aye.
We have 2. And opposed? And it looks like we have 5 that said no, so that recommendation does not pass. So now we move to Chair Klein.
okay. I'd like to make a motion to approve the legislative program 2024 with the topics Open Meetings Act and concomitant recommendation, and the topic's HB 4600 and its concomitant recommendation to be returned to the legislative subcommittee for additional work, but to approve the rest. Well, I just echoed you.
I'm not sure that, I think yours was to strike. I don't think we specifically said to return it. This motion says to return it to the legislative subcommittee. And there is a second by Chair, so the motion was by Chair Klein, second by Chair Schaefer. Discussion. Yes, Vice Chair Johnston.
Thank you. In consideration of the time crunch and that $4 million is not what $4 million used to be, even though this may be not as large as the federal, I would prefer to see at least the Farm Preservation Act move forward. The Open Meetings Act, if we want to send that back, I'm not in favor of sending back the farm one when we're heading into the legislative session in Springfield.
Chair Erickson.
Well, I mean, if I could get nothing else, I would take HB 4600. It's better than the status quo. I admit that. I mean, you know, in a perfect world, that would be what I would not take. I'd want it tied to the federal exemption. But I am okay saying to the legislature, if that's all you're going to do is 4600, then pass it. If that's all I can get, pass it. It's not my preference, but I do understand legislative processes, and sometimes there has to be some compromise, and that may be HB 4600 as presently written may be the only thing that can pass in the Illinois General Assembly. But it would be my desire, and I wish we could recommend to the state, we'll take HB 4600, but we really prefer it be tied to the federal exemption. I don't think there's a practical way to do that.
And Chair Schaefer.
I guess I have a question on process here too. When, in the past, I know that there have been occasions where a bill has come up where county administration has had to address something very quickly or state something with our lobbyists that we have to, or to our legislators. And I think that this is one of those instances where that could also be very helpful, that if county administration knows how we kind of feel about this and something should move on this bill, I believe that county administration can work with our lobbyists to show what kind of support that we may have, even though it would not be on our legislative agenda. Am I not correct in that that's how it works a lot of times?
You are correct, and that is how it's happened in the past with specific bills. I would, in the absence of it being on the platform, then I would reach out to all the membership to see what the majority of the members want to do with a specific topic, and then move from there.
And we have Chair Lehman, your question or comment?
Sure, I just wanted to get a little additional clarity on the timelines that we're speaking to. So if I could kind of throw a question out there and perhaps hear from Chair Rogal on it. Should we move forward even with HB 4600, but should we decide to send the Open Meetings Act topic back to the legislative subcommittee, if they were able to then have a meeting and get this in queue for the beginning of May, I know it was stated that they would be recessing by the end of the month. Would there be the opportunity to have some level of impact, at least for that one item that could theoretically be sent back, to still get some, to still have our presence be heard on it? Or is that really entirely too late to have any kind of influence and or impact on it?
Member Rogal, please.
not an expert, but there is always time for changes or support and opposition to bills, all the way up to 3:30 in the morning on June 1st, when I've been in session before. So, yeah, I mean, it's never, nothing is ever dead, nothing is ever too late in the General Assembly. But in order for us to communicate with our lobbyists and have that lobbyist communicate with all the members of the committees, then the longer we wait, the less time he's gonna have to make our point to them.
All right, back to you, Chair
Yeah.
Lehman.
So if I might just follow up with that notion included, it does seem like a lot of work to put to the very last minute. However, it seems advantageous to lessen the amount of last minute work if we can all somehow maybe come to agree on moving forward with 4,600, but perhaps putting the Open Meetings Act topic back to the legislative subcommittee for a quick review and adjustment for the May period. That seems like something that I could be in supportive of if anyone else is.
So I have to go back to who made that Chair Klein, seconded by Chair Schaefer.
Sure. Currently,
So are
currently the
you willing?
motion is to have both go back.
Mhm.
I'm happy to amend my motion, and Chair Schaefer agrees that we could put the topic 4,600 Family Farms Preservation Act as written through, and then just ask for the Open Meetings Act to be sent back to the legislative subcommittee.
Okay,
We're happy to accept that as an amendment to our amendment.
so that is a change to the amendment. So it only sends back the Open Meetings Act. And Vice Chair Johnston, did you have a question?
No, I was going to make a motion for that friendly amendment, so I'm glad that you guys are on board. And I think that, if we're pushing this through to the county board on Thursday, that might actually give Chair Erickson time to maybe talk with a few of the legislative subcommittee members about what language might be possible. And if there's a way to make the recommendation be something akin to taking that bill and tying it to the federal. Like, there may be a way to kind of blend those two, but I appreciate the friendly amendment, and I would vote for that amendment at this time.
All right, and Chair Erickson.
Yeah, just for purposes of the record here, I'm not opposed to HB 4600. I would just like to see it do more. And I wish we could say something like that in what we're doing. We might as well just pass it the way it is. I agree with Member Johnston that that's the way it ought to be handled.
All right, so we have Chair Friedrich.
We've whipped this horse about enough, but I'm going to do it one more time. In my opinion, I want to send the strongest signal to Springfield. For a very long time, the federal limit has been 16 million for farm estates. For a very long time, the state level has been at 4 million for a very long time. And what do we got to lose? So the strongest word a suggestion that I could put forth is follow the feds. Now, I do agree that there is a drop dead date, where it's going to expire and roll back on the federal side to a ridiculously low number, like $2 or $3 million. But we've had that happen, I don't know, 3 or 4 times through our family history on estate planning, because, it's been raising and raising. So that is the risk we take on the federal side. The state's been more consistent, but it's been at a much lower level. So I'm happy to go along with this. We just need to send a strong signal to the state. Thank you.
Chair Erickson.
Well, I can't recall how this happened, but it was President Obama who enacted that estate tax exemption several years ago because it was about to expire. And at the last minute, he signed the law. It wasn't a Republican. It was President Obama who signed that law to push that exemption to make it go up. And so that's why I don't think it'll happen this time, because I think Republicans and Democrats will come along at some point, but as usual, they won't come around till about a day before it has to be done, and then they'll figure it out.
So we, I think, have discussed this considerably, so we are going to take a vote on the amendment to send back the Open Meetings Act wording to the Legislative Committee and sending and retaining the HB 4600 for the Family Farm Preservation Act. All in favor of that amendment, say aye. Opposed? It passes. Now we are going back to our original amendment that Member Rogal and Member Klein, and that was to request approval of the resolution of the McLean County Board adopting the 2024, the newly amended 2024 legislative program. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Very good. Now we will move on to, looks like Chair Friedrich, and that's 4B, Finance Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Finance Committee brings no action items before this executive board. I will be bringing 4 items before the full board on Thursday, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions. Thank you.
No other questions? We'll move to 4C, and that's Health Committee, Chair Schaefer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The Health Committee did not meet this month, so we have no items for action today or for the board.
We will move to 4D, Justice Committee, Chair Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Justice Committee has no items for action. We'll have several items to present to the board. Thank you.
4E, Property Committee, Chair Val Lehman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Property Committee has 2 items to be presented for action. I'd like to request that we take those 2 items together unless someone has a concern otherwise.
No concerns, I don't see. So we will combine 4E1A, and that would be a grant agreement between State of Illinois Department of Natural Resources and McLean County, and request to approve the emergency appropriation, McLean County fiscal year 2024 combined annual appropriation and budget ordinance for the Illinois Department of Natural Resources grant, correct?
That is in fact correct.
Very good. So we're adding, you are making the motion?
And I so move.
And we have a second by Chair Klein. All in favor of the grant agreement with the IDNR and the emergency appropriation, say aye. Opposed? That motion passes, and the floor is back to you, Chair Lehman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the heavy lifting on reading of the previous item. We have 2 items that'll be presented before the board on Thursday, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Seeing no additional questions, we will move to 4F, and that is Land Use and Development Chair Leah Klein.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm very happy to say after a long dry spell, we are back. Land Use and Development Committee brings 1 item for action this evening. It is F1A. What is it, 4F1A? I've lost my track entirely.
Yes, 4F1A.
Okay, thank you. Request approval of a cost sharing for Dropbox recycling program intergovernmental agreement, and I so move.
And I need a second by, and that will be Chair Schaefer. Any discussion? All in favor of the cost-sharing Dropbox recycling program intergovernmental agreement, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion passes. Floor is yours again.
Thank you, Chairperson. We have no items to be presented to the board or for information, but I would say that we have passed an amendment, a proposed amendment to shore up some wording adjustments on the WEX, the wind farm, new laws that were passed that we need to kind of get our code correct, and that's going through the zoning board of appeals at this time. So it's not for us, but it will be eventually.
All right. We'll go to 4G, and that is transportation. Chair Rogal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Transportation Committee has one item for action, 4G1A, request approval of an emergency appropriation ordinance amending the McLean County fiscal year 2024 combined annual appropriation and budget ordinance for the McLean County Highway Fund 0120, and I so move.
And I need a second on that. We have a second by Chair Lehman. Any discussion? I believe, isn't this the engineering for the extension of the bike path?
Yes,
Is that
it is.
correct? All right, very good. All in favor of the emergency appropriation for 2024 annual appropriation and budget ordinance for the Highway Fund 0120, say aye. Opposed? And that motion passes. And the floor is again yours, Chair Rogal.
We have no other items to be presented for action. We will have 10 items to be presented to the board. This is our busy season of getting everyone back to working on the roads, so I can answer any questions.
All right, seeing no additional questions, no hands, we will move to 4H, and that's County Administration, Cassie Taylor, and she has a request approval of a contract with Keith Engineering and Design for engineering services for the McLean County Nursing Home. And I need a motion for that. We have a motion by Johnston, Vice Chair Johnston, a second by Chair Klein, and Ms. Taylor.
So as identified in the memo, this is for the first step in making the repairs that we would like to see to the nursing home. This is for engineering and architectural services, not actual construction work.
Questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the contract with Keith Engineering and Design for engineering and architecture services at the McLean County Nursing Home, say aye. Opposed? That motion passes. We then have another item for action, and that's approval of a contract with GH Marine, Inc. for mooring, is it mooring?
Correct.
Mooring docks at Cumlara Park. And again, these are ARPA funds, so, and I think this came through the property committee, I believe. And I need a motion for that. We have a motion by Lehman and a second by Vice Chair Johnston. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the contract with GH Marine for the docks at Cumlara Park, say aye. Opposed? That passes. Then we have a request approval of an ordinance by the McLean County Board amending Chapter 108 of the Personnel Policies and Procedures for the McLean County Code. We found that on page 130 through 142, and I need a motion for that. We have a motion by Chair Schaefer, and we have a second by Chair Friedrich. And I will give the floor to Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Chair Metzger. As we have identified in previous meetings, administration is working through our Chapter 108 Personnel Policies and Procedures Code within the McLean County Code, and we are on Article 5. The additions that you will see to this, in Article 1 and 2, we have a numbering change to be consistent throughout the chapter, and so the first 2 pages of your edits are really just numbering edits, not content edits, and then you will go on in Article 5 to see the majority of the changes. Those changes will make this code consistent with our most up-to-date compensation plan that we approve every fall with the budget for our employees.
are there questions for Ms. Taylor? And this will prepare it for the upcoming year. Is that accurate? Or is this going to change to be more comprehensive and we won't have to change it every year?
So our intent is not to have to change our code every year. Our compensation plan does get updated every year with our budget.
Okay. No additional questions or comments? All right, so we are voting on the amending Chapter 108, which includes the compensation piece, but also some numbering. All in favor of 4H1C, say aye. Opposed? And that motion passes. We have two items that we are going to be going into closed session for. So I'm going to read both are the same code, county code. Believe we need to do both of these. So it's a request approval of a waiver for the county code 108-17, closed session pursuant to section 2C1 of the Open Meetings Act 5 ILCS 120-2C1 to discuss appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, dismissal of specific employees, specific individuals who serve as independent contractors in a park, recreation, or educational setting, or specific volunteers of a public body, or legal counsel for a public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against a employee, a specific individual who serves as an independent contractor in a park, recreation, or educational setting, or a volunteer in a public body, or against legal counsel for a public body to determine its validity, and request approval of an amendment to the employment agreement with the county administrator. And that's closed session pursuant, I believe, the same identical wording, and so I'm not going to read that, but we are going into closed session to discuss two topics. And I need a motion on that. We have a motion by Vice Chair Johnston and a second by Member Lehman. And any county board members are welcome to stay. All other people will need to exit. And but do we want to go ahead and before we do that, we have a motion, but we haven't voted on it. Do we want to do the charging and fueling infrastructure grant?
That is an item for information only, and I just included
We'll
that.
we'll just come back out of closed session then.
Well, or we could discuss it now before.
I also have an item too.
Oh, okay. So
So
yeah, so we'll come back in.
we'll come back. So all in favor of going into closed session, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, we are going into closed session. No microphones, please. And Julie will get this We have returned to the County Executive Committee, and we have out of closed session, and our first order that we need to address is the waiver for the County Code 108.17, and I need a motion as to where we are going to with that. And the motion, you will say the motion, Vice Chair Johnston.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion that we refer this to Finance for a stand-up, as they are the appropriate oversight committee to consider the waiver for the county clerk's office.
And that is the motion by Johnston, and we have a second by Klein. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Our second item will be to accept a new employment agreement for Ms. Cassie Taylor. We have an increase in salary, and we have an increase in hourly or vacation. And we have a motion by Member Friedrich, and we have a second by Member Schaefer. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion passes. We have two other small items. One is, I think Kathy Dreyer wants to talk briefly about the charging and refueling infrastructure grant. And then I have something that came from the county of Logan. Logan County has requested something from us.
Last year, the Illinois Finance Authority invited us to join their application for a charging and fueling infrastructure grant. This grant will place electric vehicle charging stations throughout Illinois, and we have identified 9 locations in McLean County where we can put electric vehicle charging stations.
In the rural,
In the rural areas.
All rural,
All
yes. And Ms. Schaefer.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. I do have a question. I had seen a video of one of our state legislators that is in a wheelchair and could not use some charging stations because of the way that they have been designed. They're like up on a curb and they can't reach. So for people who have disabilities, hopefully these will be all ADA compliant where we don't have some of these issues, or how is that going to work with who we select for a contractor? Are we going to have something written in there?
The Illinois Finance Authority right now will do the request for proposals for selecting contractors, but I will be sure to tell them that we would like them to be ADA compliant. Most of the sites that we've identified are open parking lots rather than up on curbs.
And
Just from an experience perspective, I'll say the level 2 that they're looking at implementing tend to be lower and easier to access than like the level 3 ones. They're the ones that tend to be higher up and require a lot more force. So I'm glad that you'll bring that up, but I'm not sure that we'll have an issue with the level 2s.
very good. Our last thing, very quickly, and I'm just going to read this so we can move on. In response to the governor's intention to close the Logan Correctional Center, McLean County Board has received a request from a letter to support Logan County, from Logan County to asking the governor to commit to rebuilding the new Logan Correctional Center in Logan County. As the governor may announce new locations at this time, they're requesting a letter to be sent by the end of this week from this board. And so I'm asking to support the rebuilding of a new Logan Correctional Center as opposed to closing it and having other facilities outside of Logan County. So what I'm requesting is that all board members contact me in the next 24 hours, if possible, to discuss and have any questions, to let me know what their position is on a letter of support. So either yes, support that and send a letter, or no, don't support, don't send a letter. So I need you to send me an email at the county email, whether you want to provide support to this or not, and I will contact other board members and try to get their take on this, okay? So seeing no other business, this meeting, oh, I'm sorry, you have one more thing. I know, I told you I'd let you talk, and I apologize.
Thank you. I have a couple things about NACO. Next week, I will be attending a summit on intergovernmental best practices in behavioral health crisis response. I was invited to participate in that, which is going to look at the impact of state policies, recruiting, retaining behavioral health workforce, and incorporating technological advances. And so that's going to be interesting. I don't have the agenda yet for that, but that'll be next week. And also along the same lines with NACO, my Familiar Faces Leadership Network, we have a peer exchange trip coming up in June, which I didn't think that we were going to have another one, but we get to go to California. So the Leadership Network and NACO is continually working on these peer exchanges. So thank you.
Good information. All right. Now, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.